Hello, everyone. I have Sabrina here with me. She is a business astrologer, and I'm so excited about this because astrology is such a fascinating topic for me. And I am so interested to dive into this because we're talking about a different kind of astrology, not the type that you've heard about. We're talking about business astrology and how to use it to help you strategize better in your business, in your career. So, welcome, Sabrina. And do you want to add anything?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me on. Astrology is a really ancient practice. It's been around for a very long time, as I'm sure you and everyone listening knows. But there's been so many different types and styles of astrology and applications of it. And when you go back to how astrology was traditionally practiced way back when, people were not getting horoscopes done. It wasn't like, anybody and their mom was showing up to an astrologer and saying, like, tell me about my life, because truthfully, most people didn't have their birth chart. I don't know how many people back in the day even maybe knew their birthday as well. Like I know even my grandmother from like a tiny village in Greece doesn't really know her birthday. So the way astrology was being practiced was it was being practiced for the rulers of kingdoms, of realms. And their charts were, and what was going on with their charts were indicative of what was happening with the civilization or the country as a whole. And so we were talking about how, somebody's chart would actually affect how the crops were going to do that year and whether or not they should go to war or whatever. And so it was actually very focused on these much more mundane, but sort of bigger scale matters than like, who should I marry? Or, these kind of more like personal sort of questions. Personal astrology is something that came about much later. So the idea of using astrology for like professional pursuits or understanding kind of what your calling or your purpose is out in the world, or how you can use that in a more professional way has been around for a very, very long time. And I think what's really cool now is that it's not just relegated to royalty to be able to do that. Anybody can come to an astrologer or even learn astrology for themselves and see how they can apply it in this other way as it relates to how they actually want to move about the world, the legacy and the impact they want to leave, everything from what kind of career maybe feels more aligned to them, to also how they can strategize that in a way that's going to align best with their, natal blueprint. So I'm just super excited about the fact that we can do astrology this way. And it isn't just for, the top upper echelons of society to be able to do something like this, but that it's actually accessible to everyone. And I would say I predominantly work with business owners, entrepreneurs, and creatives, because I think the flexibility that they have in being able to choose how they want to work and how they want to do their business means that we can use astrology to inform a lot more choices. Not that I haven't worked with, corporate or, working with people who are in more of a kind of corporate environment, but I do think that some of the things I guess a deeper underlying belief I have, astrologically speaking, is that everyone has a purpose and everyone has a calling. And purpose can mean many different things, right? A purpose might be to be a mother, all these other aspects. But I also feel like each of us have a particular contribution that we came here to bring to society. And I think the sweet spot is when that can align up with what it is we've decided as our chosen career. And the more that I've seen entrepreneurs coming on the stage and making their soul calling their career in some way, or really trying to bridge that together, the more astrology can be a really practical tool to use in that space.
Thank you. That is absolutely fascinating. I believe that our soul calling is our career because we spend most of our time working.
Yeah.
And so a career is an identity. It's who we are in the world. It's how people know us. We live in a society where a lot of information is thrown our way. And sometimes, that can muddle up our soul purpose, right? Even if we're born knowing what our purpose is, I believe that the outer voices can sometimes set in, and that could lead to confusion. That could lead to maybe us forgetting, maybe us doubting. So I can absolutely, and I've been there. I've been there where I've questioned, what is it that I want to do? I have all these ideas of what I should do. I have all these ideas of what I thought I wanted to do, but that doesn't seem to be it. Though that seems to be coming from something superficial. That seems to be somebody else's voice, not coming from within me. And so I've been through that phase where I've asked, what do I need to do? What should I be doing? What is my soul calling? And I have gone to an astrologer. And and the thing that he said I was going to do is what I'm doing. So
Cool.
I don't know if that's a coincidence or not. And and we might not be able to figure that out, but I know that I'm happy. I know that I feel that I'm on the right path. And so for people listening, right, where can they begin to figure out what is their soul purpose in terms of career, in terms of what they want to do in life? Where can they begin?
Sure. So your birth chart shows a lot. It's meant to be a reflection of you, and people are complicated. So if anyone's ever looked at their birth chart before, and I'm sure some people in your audience have probably pulled it up on a free website online or something, it can be rather overwhelming. I mean, I think it was several years into practicing astrology for me and reading charts that I started to look at it and not feel like, because there's just so much to kind of break down, which is why it's really helpful, I think, to work with somebody and have an astrologer. I really love teaching people, actually, in the course of doing astrology. When I'm doing readings, I pull up your chart and I want to be able to have you like, look at this over here. This is what this means, and kind of lay it out, because otherwise it can feel really esoteric and super woo-woo and complicated. And also, how do you know I'm not just making stuff up? If I'm, it's like there's an opportunity here for you to learn your soul map, but we kind of have to take it bite-sized and piece by piece. Some of the main things I focus on when we're talking about this sort of calling or this greater purpose and your contribution to society, your legacy, sort of what we were just talking about, it draws from all aspects of the chart. But I focus a lot on what you have going on on your midheaven or in your 10th house, because when you imagine a birth chart, I'm just going to kind of give you a demonstration here. It's a circle. And you've got planets, and they're basically showing where all the planets are in the sky around you. So it's not, some people think astrology is geocentric, like as though the earth is the center of everything. It's not true. Every birth chart is omnicentric, which means it's how the universe is sort of laid out around you as an individual when we're talking about your soul. And so you see all these planets around it. And the base of the chart are the roots and the foundation. We talk about the 4th house, which is the house at the bottom of the chart. That has to do with your family of origin. It has to do with your ancestry. It has to do with your childhood and where you come from. And if you imagine kind of a tree and the roots being down there, the top of the tree, where all of that energy that was drawn from the roots that we've then kind of transformed grows into the branches that then fruit and flower, which is like the fruits of our labor, quite literally. That's the top of the chart, which is the 10th house, and our midheaven, which is like high noon right above our head. And so everybody has this sort of trajectory within their life where they draw from the roots that they were given. You have a specific culture you came from, a specific family line. Your childhood was something. And that's all the raw materials that you're going to take to then actually learn to step into your higher calling and your purpose, So it's not like a separation. It's actually all about that entire journey from, drawing from the roots and growing up and actually expanding out here into the world. So I talk a lot about the 10th house. I talk a lot about the midheaven when it comes to helping you get clear about that. But that's just a gateway into many different aspects of, understanding the chart. But that's usually things people don't know about much. Most people are like, I know my sun sign. If you've been looking into astrology a little bit more, you might also know your moon sign or your rising sign. It gets into a little bit more advanced stuff when you start talking about something like the midheaven or some of the different houses, which is why, like I said, whether you decide you want to learn this, there's amazing programs to learn how to study a little bit by yourself. And kind of getting into in bite-sized pieces. But working with someone can be really helpful to help you kind of see those deeper layers that you don't get just sort of pulling up your horoscope on a website or something.
Yeah, absolutely. And so do you go by what planets are in a particular house? Like you mentioned 10th house, right? That's an indication of career, or standing in society or whatnot. And so if there's like a particular planet, is that what decides it, or does it go a little deeper?
It's a combination of factors. So I'll often look at the sign and the house that the midheaven falls in. I'll look at what sign is on the cusp of the 10th house. I'll look at whatever planets are there. And then another thing that a lot of people don't know about, I think, too much is understanding rulership. So every single sign in astrology, in the zodiac, has a planet that rules that sign. So for instance, Aries is ruled by Mars and Taurus is ruled by Venus. So if you have, like, I'll give you an example. I have Pisces in my 10th house. In traditional astrology, and I practice Western traditional astrology, Jupiter is the ruler of Pisces traditionally. And so when you want to understand something deeper about a certain area of a chart, you actually go and find that planet that rules that sign and where that's located and what sign and house it falls in, and if it's in specific astrological alignments to other planets. So as you can see, pretty quickly it can get rather complex. But I do my best, and I know a lot of other really successful and professional astrologers that do a really good job kind of breaking it down bite-sized so we can understand, what does all this mean? Because the art form of this really is that it's all about a language of archetypes. And, we have to start by learning each individual archetype. It's like learning a new language, right? You have to learn the alphabet. And so learning the archetypes is learning the alphabet. What is Aries? What is the 4th house? You're learning all the different aspects of the language. And then the art form, and this is really where the mastery comes in, is how you start to layer these pieces on top of each other, and that takes years. I mean, I have been practicing astrology seriously for over 20 years now. And, I got into it because I had a fascination from a very young age. I always felt like I'm Greek. I'm a Greek American. I grew up learning about Greek mythology. And of course, the planets are all named after the Greco-Roman gods. And so I felt this familiarity with the archetypes. They were characters of my imagination that I was engaged with really young. And then another cool thing, because you'd mentioned like whether something is coincidence or not. And I tend to think that there is no coincidence, and, everything sort of appears the way that it is because there's a reasoning behind it. But I was given the name Sabrina Ourania, and Ourania is my middle name. And it was my grandmother's name because in the Greek culture, you tend to name your grandchildren after the grandparents. But in ancient Greek mythology, Ourania was the muse of astrology. And so, knowing that about myself, I sort of always felt like, oh, this is part of my calling. This is part of my destiny. And I didn't practice astrology professionally all of the last 20 years. I started another business. I, spent 12 years as an entrepreneur with a women's coaching business. But it was something that I was always using behind the scenes with myself, with clients, with how I was doing my business. And then eventually I realized that I really wanted to focus on working with other entrepreneurs using some of these tools and techniques that I had been using and kind of come back to my roots. And I was like, this is what I knew I was always meant to do, but I learned a lot of interesting skills along the way that were very useful to me in my own business. So
I didn't mention this when we were talking earlier. And a lot of people who've been following me on this YouTube channel since day one know that I started this because of astrology.
Oh,
yeah. So like some people listening are very familiar with astrology. So what was happening was I just went through a period where I was really confused. Nothing that I was doing was working out. And I somehow found astrology, and turns out I was going through this time period in Vedic astrology called Ketu Mahadasa, which is like the south node of the moon. I don't know if you're familiar with the Vedic. So there's like north node, south node. And then in Vedic astrology, they have time periods. I think they focus more on somebody's like time period that they're going through in their life and how that informs what you might be going through. And so, yeah, it just turns out that I was going through my Ketu time period, and that made me understand a lot of things. That made me put a lot of things in perspective, and that also helped me get through that time period with that understanding. And after that, I also found other ways to understand what I was going through. I went to school to study clinical psychology. That happened during my Ketu time period. And so needless to say, I found different things to help me understand my experience, and I didn't rely excessively on astrology. And I know this is something that we're going to get into as well, like the ethics of it, right? How to utilize it to help you understand rather than create fear. And this is to empower rather than to make you feel helpless. And we can get into it right now. Can you speak a little bit about that? How maybe people can utilize astrology to in a way feel stuck or helpless and think that the stars above us are dictating everything and they have all the power and we're this immobile, helpless beings, when that's not the truth. It's meant to be the exact opposite, right? It's meant to empower you by giving you a roadmap. Do you want to talk a little bit
Yeah,
about
I
that?
love what you just said right now, because you made a distinction between us and the stars above. But, if you understand anything about science and quantum physics, we are stardust, quite literally. And so, on this very fundamental layer of reality, there is no separation between what is happening in the universe above and us down here. And then, on a more psychological level, to me, those gods and goddesses that we name the planets after, they're not beings that are external than us, that are, like in the ancient mindset. So we'll go back to ancient Greece. People would think that they needed to appease Mars, or Mars might do something to them or whatever. And there was this kind of, relationship where, you had to make good with them so that they wouldn't, seek retribution or something on you. In modern
Right.
psychological astrology, and I'm also, my practice is also really informed by that. These archetypes are actually alive within ourselves. They're aspects of the human psyche. They're aspects of the collective unconscious, but they're ones that all humans tap into within themselves. So there is no difference. Like, we are the stars and we are these archetypes and we are embodying them ourselves. So I don't see it as like a dichotomy in any way where there's anything external that is doing something to us. It's actually an inner process of soul growth and development that we are embodying and expressing and learning and moving through via these different archetypal energies that we're embodying. So I'm just saying that, even though that I know that that can sound, that's a little out there and like spiritual in terms of how to, but the conceptualizing of that I think is very helpful, because people conceptualize astrology differently. Some people think the planets are doing something to us. I don't have that framework. And so it doesn't make me feel helpless, whether or not it's a scientific thing where it's like they're shooting energy at me or gravitational things, or it's more like that they're a god, and the god is doing something to me. I don't see it that way. And to me, that worldview actually puts me in a far more empowered position. But secondly, this
Right.
is such an
Yeah.
incredibly powerful tool, and any powerful tool, anything powerful comes with responsibility and can be used for good or can be used for bad, you know? And it really has to do with how one is applying it and who that person is and really where they are in their journey, and also in sort of their mental health and stability. I'll give you an example. I was really into tarot when I was young also. And, but I was a pretty angsty teenager. My parents were going through divorce. Like, I had a lot of really rough stuff going on for me in my teen years, and I wasn't very mentally in a very good place. And I found very quickly that playing with tarot, when I was doing it for other people, fine. When I was using it for myself, I couldn't help but attach on to some of these more negative images. I pull like the death card or the devil card, and it was like I didn't have enough of like objectivity from what I was working with, that I wasn't in a place strong enough mentally that I wouldn't let myself go into fear around it. And I eventually decided, you know what? I'm going to put tarot away. Like, I don't actually think that I am using it in a healthy way. And I've seen this happen with a lot of astrologers, especially in the beginning when people first kind of get hooked on astrology and then start going down the rabbit hole and really, really get into it. You kind of over astrologize everything in life. And you can do that. But generally, at some point, you get diminishing returns. Like, it just starts being like a little bit too it's unnecessary, but like, it starts to kind of create a burden. On the one hand, you can sort of blame everything on astrology, like, oh, Mercury retrograde, or I'm just this way because I have this transit or whatever, and it starts kind of being a thing where you lose some of your own personal accountability in life because it's like, the astrology
Right.
made me do it. And then on the other hand, it's just like, that's such a head trip to live in that world. And at some point you stop living here in reality with people and you're just living with charts or something.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's healthy either. And so, I think it's something that everybody has to approach with a real transparency with themselves, like real with myself. Like, am I using this in a way that feels responsible? Do I see that it's helping me? If it's not helping me, is there something I can do to shift this? Would an outside perspective help me in this? Even me as an astrologer, I've gone through periods of time in my life where I've been nervous or scared. I had, health concerns come up that made me really anxious. And I found myself looking at my astrology and being worried that possibly the worst case scenario might happen here or there. And that was the time where as an astrologer, I have astrologers I go to too, and I'm sure, as a therapist, it's like we also go to therapists, I have appealed to other astrologers because I'm recognizing right now that I'm not being objective enough with my own experience here. It's very hard to do. I could use support in this, and so,
Right.
yeah, I think any powerful tool like this, we really have to be honest with where we're at and how it is that we're using it. And this is not meant to be, I have a general understanding of what's happening astrologically most days because for my business, I do reports and I say, hey, I have a membership and I tell people like, this is what's coming up this week astrologically. This is how you can do it with your business. But I can't fixate on it because it would paralyze me, and that's not how I want to live my life, So everything here has to be sort of taken with, I'm going to use it to the degree that I find it useful and empowering. And if when I see myself falling into thought patterns that are not that are disempowering, that are fear-based, I need to catch myself and either create distance, seek outside support. Maybe this isn't for me, or even me at this moment, whatever that is, we're going to have to be real with ourselves no matter what. But, the things this powerful will come with this type of challenge. You really can't separate that. So I don't want to downplay that that's the reality. And I also don't want to downplay that, I've had a lot of clients who come to me who have had negative experiences with other astrologers because somebody gave them a very fatalistic answer about something that, had told them, something was going to happen that was terrible. And then they were, it's almost to me like the same kind of situation. Like if you go to a doctor and they're like, you're going to die in 6 months or something, I don't want to speak to whether the ethics of that because I'm not a doctor and I don't know, but I do think that when people, we are so susceptible to suggestion. And to me, I don't see myself as the authority on someone else's life experience. How I view this is that astrology is a language. I speak the language. I'm here to translate it. But the sessions that I'm doing with clients is a dialogue. I say, how does this land? They tell me, you know what? That's interesting because it makes me think of this thing that's been happening in my life. And I go, cool, like, let's explore this in the context of this experience that resonates with you around that. It's never like, hey, I'm going to tell you how it is for you in your life. I feel like that's a very unethical use of astrology. And I think that does a lot more harm than good. I think seeing this as you're the expert on you, I'm the expert on astrology, and we have a dialogue, and where it is that these things come together, we can birth some really beautiful new insights together. But it's always meant to be, how can this information embolden you, empower you to take action, make changes, One more thing I want to say to this, because I know I have a lot of thoughts on this. I didn't realize I had this many thoughts on this, but when I first became an entrepreneur, my first business was as a women's health and wellness coach. And that started because I received a diagnosis when I was young of polycystic ovarian syndrome. And I was really interested in natural healing. And every doctor I went to was trying to get me back on pharmaceutical drugs and, was sort of fatalizing my, there's no cure. And so I had already gotten a master's in philosophy, cosmology, and consciousness studies. And that was kind of my wanting to continue with astrology. But I ended up going back to school and getting another master's degree in coaching. And specifically around nutrition and health and wellness, because I wanted to find a way to heal myself. And I ended up reversing my condition. And so it happened. It just was happenstance that I ended up creating this career because I kept finding women that needed the same sort of support that I did. But I'm very grateful that I had that training in coaching and that I spent that decade or more focusing on coaching, because those are skills that I actually don't think all astrologers have. No fault of their own, but it's a specific skill set, And so coaching helps people make changes in their life that are meant to be sustainable, that are aligned with what it is that they need. It empowers people, And I think the bridging together of astrology with coaching work, with leadership coaching, actually allows people to take the insights of astrology and begin to apply it in their life in a way that actually works for them, And so that I'm really grateful that I kind of had that foray into that, because when I came back to doing astrology full time, I had this whole skill set on how to support people in taking actionable steps in their personal life, in their professional life, using the types of insights that we were coming up with, that we were exposing in the work we were doing together, rather than just having a reading and being like, huh, that was cool. You know what I mean? Which it is, and sometimes it's like, that's amazing, but what do we do with it? And I feel like the what do we do with it piece is actually far more important.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with the being strategic, right? Starting off with an intention of where are we headed? What is the intention of this? Is the intention to guide them in a way, in a better direction in their life, to like you said, to be able to make the changes that they need, or is the intention to leave them helpless? And that makes a world of a difference, right? Like whether you empower your client or whether you leave them helpless. And something you mentioned about, right, like reading your own chart. I think, like, psychologically, we all have a negativity bias. Yeah. I think that is the brain is just designed like that. And I think it's really difficult to completely separate ourselves from that, right? And exactly like you said, to be mindful. If you were to embark on this yourself, great. Like, it's a tool that's there to empower you. Utilize it. Utilize astrology to see what kind of decisions you need to make in your life, what kind of changes you need to make in your life. But be mindful if you're being extremely negative, or it's having a hold on you where you are externalizing it. Like you said, the stars are separate from me. The stars are above me. They're controlling me. I'm a little puppet being controlled by them. And so it is a way to not take accountability for yourself. And the power that is within you, and to have a way to put power and so blame at the same time on something external outside of you, so you're not doing it. And I think that might be a cop out, right? Whether people are doing it consciously or not. Yes. It's an easy way out. And I think that's where initially this channel was about me sharing about astrology, and I would get a lot of comments, just putting so much power on astrology. And I get it when you first find it, right? It makes so much sense that you want to exclusively rely on it. But eventually my own journey was that the stars want me to see this through multiple perspectives. I understood it through astrology, and it was okay, let me understand what I'm going through psychology now. Let me go to school to study psychology.
Some people resonate more with certain lenses than others, and there's different types of practices. There's Vedic, there's gene keys, there's human design, there's different types of lenses that resonate more with certain people. But we have to remember it's still a lens. It's still a filter through which we are trying to make sense of reality. And reality is actually way bigger and more unfathomable than that. And we can't collapse everything down to that one lens, And we were talking, before we started the podcast, I was saying that, there's one area of life for me where I don't really use astrology, which is with my children. I looked at their birth charts when they were born, and I think in the way that I could look at a chart and be like, oh, this might help me mother them in a better way if I understand some of their natural proclivities. And that's been very useful, actually. My husband always is like, you were so spot on about our kids when you read their charts for the first time, because, we geeked out about it right after our little babies were born, and I was like, I think my first daughter, I think she really is going to need to do a lot of sports. I can see her being like really active and competitive. Like, we need to know how to work with that, stuff like that. But when it comes to like the day to day, there is a way in which I know I can't use astrology in a healthy way. If for instance, they were to get sick, right? This happens. I get my kids, they get colds and flus and whatever, and I have a day where my kid has a fever. Like, I'm not going to go and look at her chart, because that's the kind of thing where I know, because it's my children, which is a weak spot to me, where I will struggle with not having that negativity bias and being fearful. And so I just don't do it. I will do it after the fact where, something has happened to them and it's passed, and I'll look back and I'll go, interesting. This was happening in the chart. Da, 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 da. But it's like safer to do it after the fact, and it helps inform me and my skills in astrology. But it's like, it's already over and done with. So I don't have the same kind of grip around it, around fear or anxiety. So I also want to say, like, even as an astrologer, like, I'm not immune to this. I've had to learn responsible ways to work with it, because yes, I'm an astrologer, but first and foremost, I'm a human with like my own human fears and anxieties, and I can't get out of that, you know? So I have to use it in a way that works for me. And I definitely encourage everyone to, you know, come at this with respect for themselves, for the art form, but with compassion for themselves, you know?
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. So it's 2025 now, still January. A lot of people still probably have New Year's resolutions. A lot of them probably are centering around career. Some of the things, whether people are, knee deep in a career or they're making career changes, pivoting into something else. We all want to know what to focus on. We will all want to know how to maximize opportunities to the best of our ability. And so I was wondering if we could go into some rising signs, or I don't know if you go
Sure.
by ascendants or rising signs
Sure.
or sun signs, and what to be focusing on for this year. And can we start with Taurus? That's why rising sign is Taurus.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know, I love that you were saying, you know, a lot of people are, you know, pivoting or making changes because this is a year, you know, if we speak to the astrology of 2025, um, it's a big year. It's a year that astrologers have been looking at for quite some time, actually. And it's because within one calendar year, all of the outer planets are all changing signs. And that's unusual because, for instance, so Pluto just finally entered into Aquarius for good. And that was just a couple months ago. And Pluto changes signs. It varies because he has an elliptical orbit, but he's going to be in the sign of Aquarius for 20 years. So anywhere from like 11 to 30 years it takes for Pluto to go from one sign to the next. So, you know, even within the course of a human lifespan, we don't go through too many Pluto signs, you know, because, yeah, he moves so slowly. It takes 250 years for Pluto to go all the way around the zodiac. So Pluto changed signs. And then upcoming Neptune, the next furthest most planet out, is going to change signs. And that only happens every 14 years. And then later this summer, Uranus, which is the next outermost planet, is going to change signs. And that only happens every 8 years. And also this year, Saturn is going to change signs. That happens every 3 years, as well as Jupiter, which happens every year. And then the nodes are changing signs. You were talking about Ketu and Rahu. The nodes are going to change, and that changes every year and a half. And so each of these are kind of like, you know, I think about like a clock with all these different gears, and some move fast and some move slow. And that's how it is with the charts. But the fact that within one calendar year, all of those farthermost planets, and then even into Jupiter and Saturn, and also the nodes, are all changing signs, means there's a very large scene change this year. The archetypal energies that are at play are changing drastically. And we're not quite in the fray of it just yet, but we're right at, and I feel like the energy of where we are in time right now is sort of being between two worlds, because the old world and what we've known has actually ended, and the new one is right about to begin. And we're sort of in this liminal space between the old and the new. And I've been really trying to support my clients and being really compassionate with themselves right now, because, you know, we often start out the new year being like, new year, new me, I'm going to make changes. And we've been in the middle of several retrograde cycles, but predominantly right now, Mars, which has sort of slowed our roll on being able to actually jump forward into the new, take action on where we want to go. Because it's almost like in this liminal space, we still have some things to wrap up and create closure on before we can fully turn to face the new future. But by the time we get into March, for instance, and April and May, things will actually, there will be a lot more momentum in that will be shifting us, and a lot of things will be changing. So, you know, it's an interesting year because we really can't, I don't really treat, generally speaking, I don't really treat New Year's as the new year, because as an astrologer, for me, it's like the spring equinox is really when the new year actually begins. And you know, there's different ways that people look at that, but especially this year, if you're feeling like things are kind of slow going right now, and you haven't really you know, you haven't been able to follow through on your resolutions, and, you know, things just haven't kind of picked up traction in the way you want, that's not you. That is kind of what's happening collectively. And it's because we need to make sure that we really have made good with where we're at, and where the past and where things have been. And it's like we're given this moment of pause before the new world really starts for us, you know? And so I'm encouraging people to take advantage of that, really, because it will be a very different situation. Yeah. So anyway, when it comes to looking at the right.
Wait, so before,
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, before we jump into that, so you talk, and I resonate a lot with that, right? This, I feel like I'm still hibernating.
Yes.
It's January, and a part of me is like, well, I want to be going to the gym every day. I have this idea of, the typical New Year's resolution. I have this idea of what my ideal day-to-day looks like, and it's not quite there yet. And part of me is like, it's okay. It's okay to slow down. So can you talk a little bit about this time period, like January until March or April? How can people best utilize it?
Yeah. Okay, so I would say the predominant feature right now, and then speaking to kind of your experience of that, has to do with this Mars retrograde. So all the planets, except the sun and the moon, will retrograde, which means that they appear to look like they're going backwards in the sky. They're not actually going backwards. It has to do with our perception from the Earth. But how that is off, but what's interesting is Mars is actually the planet that retrogrades the least. He only does it every 2 years or so. And, but it does happen for, several months' time. But Mars is the planet of action. He makes us want to, it's our willpower, it's our drive, it's our like, get up and go, and when Mars is retrograde, what he's giving us an opportunity to do is to not keep just going for going's sake, but to pay attention to whether or not we're actually headed in the direction we want to go in. And we're always needing to course correct, it's not like we just made a decision and start going and they just forever go that direction, The intelligence of life is things have changed, you learn new information, the circumstances are different. And so when the Mars retrogrades do happen every 2 years or so, you get a moment to kind of go, oh, maybe I need to go like 4 degrees this way, and it gives us kind of that opportunity to really get clear on where we might need to course correct a little bit so that when he starts going direct again, we have so much more clarity on the direction we want to go. And then we can start going, and so that I think is kind of the best use of this time right now. Also, themes from the past can often come back with retrogrades, and particularly with Mars retrogrades, it could be how we've related to men, the masculine, how we engage with masculinity, how we engage with our drive, our need to take action, our assertiveness, our aggression, our anger, the things that propel us. And so those are themes that can come up, and we kind of have to look at them and say, like, am I in right relationship with these things? But I think a lot of it has to really do with direction, because, if we were, for instance, to push through and dive into what we wanted to do this year, and then later come to find out, I actually should have made some course corrections and maybe I need to pivot and go this way. It's kind of like this gives us an opportunity to do it before we've already sort of gone too far down the path, Yeah.
And I want to second that. I want to take a minute and second that, because so Taurus rising, right? Taurus rising. So I have been guilty of bulldozing my way through things that I wanted to do in the past. And sometimes it's worked out, but then it's always come with, man, that's not what I wanted. And I can absolutely second that. And I think that's exactly what I've learned now. And it feels really unnatural to me, like taking the moment and slowing down and really not doing anything. I'm someone who has, I have a vision board, I have goals. I look at my to-do every day. I have goals every day, like super type A in what I want to achieve in life. And it has served me in the past, but you're right. It has come with, that's not what I wanted. It was almost time wasted.
Yeah.
So right now, now in this phase of my life, even though in my body at times it feels unnatural to slow down, I'm learning to work with the seasons.
Yes.
Right? Because my grandma used to say, like, there's a season for everything. And she had like crops, like she had a rice field, and she said, oh, there's a season where you plant, and there's a season where you harvest, and there's a season where you don't do anything. The season where you're not supposed to do anything, you can't go try to plant. And so that kind of has stayed with me, but I guess not really, because I really wasn't applying it.
We've become really disconnected from cyclical living. And that is something that I think has been having a moment and a resurgence, but it requires a lot of unlearning. because we've created a lot of artificial timelines for ourselves. I mean, for instance, the Gregorian calendar is artificial. I mean, what the hell makes January 1st the day we're supposed to start our new workout regimen and we're going to change how we eat? Yeah, exactly. And so I think, astrology, just like the seasons of planting and letting fields lay fallow and all that, as well as for women, our menstrual cycle and the times of the month that we're maybe more extroverted and we have more energy for things versus the times that we're also meant to rest and self-care. There's cycles within cycles. There's these fractals of these cycles. But I think that those are, you were asking me before, like, what's a big tip to give people that they can start working on right now? I would say learn to align yourself with the cycle you're in. So if you're a woman, focus on where you are in your menstrual cycle, and if you're not still menstruating, look at the moon cycle, the new and the full moon that's happening every month as a way to sort of understand, is the energy building toward like a crescendo and culminating with the full moon and that's really extroverted? Or are we moving to a new moon and things are more internally focused right now and I need time to rest and I need time to take care of myself and go within and dream and vision before I start something new? Look at the seasons that are happening, whether you're living in a place that has 4 seasons or you're not, we still have this inner sense of the seasons that's really built into us, that is all to me astrological, even though we're not talking about any other specific planets besides planet Earth or the moon. These are very built into our DNA cycles that make sense to us. And I think to realign with those is to come into right relationship with life and with reality rather than the artificial ones that we create about Monday is the first day of the week and I got to be super productive on Monday. And like, this kind of like overlay that we've created. And especially because, Western culture has been very patriarchal. It's like, it's very masculine. It's very go, go, go. It's very linear thinking. And we have to remember the cyclicality of things. And I think that, aligning with the cycles and allowing ourselves to go into times of hibernation, to go into times of rest, actually, in the grand scheme of things, does make us more productive for the reason that you said, because if we just keep plowing ahead and pushing forward, well, one, we burn ourselves out. And I'm sure everyone has had an experience with burnout before, but also did we waste time because we didn't give ourselves that time to actually restructure, re-envision, think about, maybe I want to make a decision that changes the direction of this. And now I have to backtrack when had I just given myself a week to kind of like step away and like journal, like you were saying, or, focus on my home life or give myself that downtime, maybe I would have had those downloads that help me go, oh, I now can come to this refreshed and I'm willing to make the changes now. And I don't have to do it, undo it again later, or do extra work later.
Yeah. So I'm going to talk about a step by step for this. And I'm interested in this for myself also. And a lot of people might not be looking at the moon. So they might not know when new moon happens, when full moon happens. When did they find out? Is just like literally looking at the moon, or is it like an app?
Sure. Yeah. People can follow? Look, the easiest way and the most foundational is being immersed in nature. Like you were talking about, I think you said your aunt who, was growing things. Like, once again, we are so disconnected from these things. Most people are not farming, So if you were farming, you would know what the moon was doing because that affects the water and the tides. And you would know what season it is because you'd know whether it's the time to harvest or it's the time to plant, and those are skills that all of our ancestors had to have to actually survive. Like, we wouldn't have gotten here if they didn't know how to work with the cycles of time like that. And in a way, I think it's a bit sad and almost embarrassing that we've all sort of lost that, but like, no shame on anyone. I don't have it either. It's like, but we sort of have to remember like the wisdom of our ancestors, here. And so, yeah, going outside and looking at the moon, I think is powerful for many reasons beyond just knowing kind of what time it is, But, before we had artificial light, our relationship to the moon was very distinct. People did a lot of things during the full moon because that's when there was enough light at night that people could actually see and go about and do things. If you don't have street lights and you don't have lights in your home, the full moon is a really important night because that's the night you might actually be able to see if you had, gatherings or whatever going on. You would know not to do stuff during the dark of the moon because it's really dark at night when there's a new moon. You can't see the moon, you can see the stars and they're extra bright and beautiful, but you definitely are, out of luck if you're outside in the dark somewhere and you can't find your way around during the new moon, So I think it's really important to focus on those things. You know, I think just going outside and saying, oh, is the moon bigger today than it was yesterday? Oh, it must be growing. We must be going toward a full moon. You know, I can go look at the moon now and I can
Right.
usually guess about how many days it'll be before the next full moon, just because I've gotten so familiar with what the
Mm.
moon looks like at different times. But yeah, each
Mm-hmm.
month we cycle from a new moon to a full moon and then back to a new moon. And in the astrology, each time it's going from one sign to the next, you know? So for instance, right now we're in Aquarius season, and the next new moon that we're going to have is in the sign of Aquarius. And so, you know, it's both the sun and the moon are going to be in the sign of Aquarius. That's something that you have to look up, you know, and there are many apps that can help
Mm-hmm.
people with that. You know, there's some that are more basic. I think if you just typed into Google, you know, I wouldn't use ChatGPT for this because I've noticed that it doesn't really know where in time we are. And so it doesn't give accurate information about things like that. But, you know, look online, like, you know, what sign is the moon in today? That was one of the first
Mm-hmm.
practices that I started doing in astrology way back when I think I was still in high school. I was in a class at this like esoteric bookstore. I was really interested in, you know, they had like this kind of training about connecting with the cycles of nature. And I was like, I want to take this class. And so one of the first things they gave us was a journal. And we wrote the phase of the moon. So is it new? Is it full? Is it waxing, like getting bigger? Is it waning?
Mm-hmm.
We wrote the sign that the moon was in. And then we wrote how we felt, like physically, how am I feeling? Emotionally, how am I feeling? Mentally, there was a spot for women to write whether they were cycling or not. And she was just like, you know, fill this out every day. And so after about 3 months of doing that, it became so clear that there was natural patterns that would happen to me every month at certain times when the moon was,
Yeah.
you know, waxing or when it was in certain signs. The next layer of this is looking at your birth chart and seeing what house or what area of your life, that's what the houses
Mm-hmm.
represent, these different signs and the moon is in at this time, because it can help you get clear on what you could be focusing on at that time. So I'll give you an example. I talked about how the upcoming new moon is in Aquarius. Okay, so Aquarius is
Mm-hmm.
my ninth house, which is the house of like higher learning, international travel, publishing, disseminating information widely. So, you know, to me, it's like, this is a really great time for me to set intentions, which is a new moon activity, around studying something new, releasing something I'm publishing, whether it's a podcast like this or something I'm writing and putting out, traveling. And so I'm like, oh, this is what time it is to focus on those sort of things. Now, whether I consciously decide to
Mm-hmm.
do that or not, it's going to be happening. But this is how to work with astrology in a very conscious way, is that if you know that that's what time it is, then you can align what you're doing in terms of the activities, the action steps you're taking, the things you're focusing on with what's already sort of happening anyway, you know? And so
Like
that's kind of the
beautiful.
next layer to add to it. But yeah, step one, look at what the moon's doing. Step two, use an app
Mm-hmm.
or look online to see what the different moon signs are. The moon changes signs every 2.5 days. So you have about 2.5 days of a particular energy being kind of more highlighted. And so, you know, this is the kind of thing, like I said, you begin to discover patterns. Like I mentioned to you before, I realized that I was very productive getting things done, writing papers I needed to write for college and stuff when the moon was in an earth sign, when it was in Virgo or when it was in Capricorn. So
Mm-hmm.
I started using this as a tool where it was like, oh, if I have papers to write, and I was a philosophy major and I double majored in philosophy English. So all I was doing was writing papers in college. So I knew, okay, when the moon is in these signs, this is when I really try to hustle and get a lot of my writing done, because I'm more productive at that
Mm-hmm.
time than I am at other times, you know? Does it mean it always aligns perfectly? No. And even when I do business astrology with people now, does it mean that they always, like I tell them what the best day to take a certain task is, to launch a thing? Does it always work out that you can do it that day? No. And we're not meant to be perfect about it, but it can definitely inform us and support us to align with the energetics of the time, instead of, for instance, swimming upstream. You know, it's like, this is how you can work with the flow of time rather than in
Mm-hmm.
resistance and against it. And the moon is like the most easy place to start.
Right. So when is the new moon happening in
It's a really
Aquarius?
good question. I should know this off the top of my head, but I will let you know right now. Let's see. I'm pulling up my astrology app. Okay, we're actually only a few days away from it. So the moon is going to happen. Look at the chart. I don't know if you can. I'm like showing you. I like, this is what the little charts look like. So right now, the
Oh,
sun's already
cool.
in Aquarius. The moon is in is midway through the sign of Sagittarius. So it's going to be within the next week. We have about another day of the moon being in Sagittarius. Tomorrow, the moon moves into Capricorn. It'll be there for 2.5 days. So it's sometime midweek of this upcoming week. I want to say maybe Thursday or Friday. But yeah, it's coming up this coming week. I can tell you right now. Hold on.
Oh,
It's worth me actually checking so that I can also say exactly when it's going to be. Or maybe it's taking me longer than I thought it would take. Oh, here it is. The new moon in Aquarius is going to be happening on the 29th of January. So that's Wednesday.
29th. Okay, so I have a selfish reason why I'm asking. Aquarius is my 10th house. And so that's career, like you said.
Yep.
So is this the time for me to set intentions?
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
To write what direction I want to go in? And when is the best time to start? So 29th is the when it's happening.
Yeah, right before the new moon, we're still dealing with the end of the previous moon. So when it comes, when you use, so electional astrology is the type of astrology that we use to help us figure out the best time to do something. So for instance, I elect electional charts for clients when they're like, when's the best day for me to launch this business? When's the best day for me to sign this contract, you know? And so when people are wanting to start something new, you don't always have to do it at the new moon. That's not the only time. But if you are going to do it at a new moon, you want to wait till the new moon has actually happened. Because if you can imagine, the other moon has gone dark and it's ended. So we're in a phase of like dying and ending. But when the new moon is officially happened, so the exact time that this is going to be, so I'm in Central Time, but it's going to happen around 6:30 a.m. on, Wednesday the 29th. So I wouldn't be necessarily doing the intention work around it on the night before because we're still looking at the previous moon. So I would say later that day, once that new moon has actually happened, we've quite literally birthed a new moon. So remember, the sun is the masculine principle and the moon is the feminine principle. And at a new moon, they come together in the same place. So if you think about what happens when the masculine and feminine come together, they fertilize. They fertilize for the next month. And so it's about the birthing of something that's going to then grow over the course of the next month and also grow over the next 6 months until we get to the full moon in Aquarius, which happens in Leo season 6 months from now. So the intentions that you're planning here at this new moon are going to really come to fruition 6 months later when we get to that full moon in Aquarius that happens, But yeah, you want to wait till after the exactness of the new moon is passed. And then, that's a beautiful time to set intentions. That's a kind of new moon keyword around the area of your life that the house in your chart that you have the sign of Aquarius in, and you have it in your 10th house, which is about career. So I would say it's a really great time to be open to any kind of downloads that come in around that, to brainstorm ideas, to journal about it, to meditate on it, to have a meeting with your team and see what insights come up, and not necessarily to formalize anything, but to just plant the seeds of something new at that time. The new moon is the time to be planting the seeds of what you want to grow later, and so that's a beautiful use of it. Absolutely. I'm glad you said that and you had a personal example of how that might work for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And so just so I understand, the seeds that you plant during the new moon, that the of a sign that the moon is in, will come into fruition when the moon is when it's full moon in the same sign.
In the same sign.
Is that right? Or can you?
Yeah, I mean, it's things also, you plant seeds sometimes that grow for much longer than just that, right? I mean, if you start a business, it's not like it's culminated 6 months later, but the specific intentions that you set there, you will see come to some kind of a culmination at that 6-month mark. Because so from a new moon, 6 months later, that you have a full moon in that same sign. So a full moon happens when the sun and the moon are in opposite signs. So right now they're both in Aquarius, but when we get to Leo season, when the sun is in Leo and Leo is the opposite sign of Aquarius, the moon will move into Aquarius and we'll have a full moon. And that's like the complementary moon to this one, So yes, exactly. The intentions that you're setting here, I would imagine that during Leo season over the summer, you'll find, and then you never know this unless you're tracking it and you look back. But when you do, you're always pleasantly amazed at how this actually works out. You'll probably be looking back at this time and the things that actually you're starting to, ideas that you're starting to seed in this new moon and in this moment will likely have come to a place where they're starting to, be expressed in the world somewhere, or something you plan
Right.
now. I was going to give you an example. I led a women's retreat last year, and I remember it was 6 months before that I sat down with my girlfriend and I started planning this retreat. And then, it just happened to be, we didn't even necessarily plan to do it for 6 months later. It just kind of was the timing that aligned. I'm sitting at the retreat, we're celebrating a full moon all together at this women's retreat. And then I realized, it was exactly the new moon 6 months before where I set the intention to create this retreat. And here we are living it. You know what I mean? And that's just one of many examples about how that can often look.
Yeah. And I love that. It's like living consciously, right? Whether, like you said earlier, whether you're aware of it or not, or whether you're conscious of it or not, it's still happening. But why not generate that awareness, right? Why not be conscious of it and utilize it as a tool that's going to help you?
Yes. Yeah. Because
Beautiful.
to me, it's like, I like, that I feel like it can give you a sense of empowerment to be able to align with these cycles. Mm-hmm. It can give you competitive edge, certainly. I think seeing, your astrology chart, your cosmic blueprint as, part of your business plan, even really, like it's looking at all of this being a, like even business is a spiritual practice in disguise. Everything in life, if approached that way with consciousness and with intention, is a spiritual practice in disguise. And so to me, it's like astrology is a way to be able to, unlock those codes and use them in ways that can, really maximize our impact, support our success, help us to see the deeper meaning and the bigger picture behind things that are going on related to maybe our personal ambition or whatever in the world, Yeah, I think it's much bigger than just like it's a hack, but it is a hack, but there's something much deeper about how our personal evolution and kind of collective evolution can come together when we are using astrology consciously as a strategy.
Right. Absolutely. And just a quick question before we quickly, dive into the different rising signs. Sure. So does the planet that's in the house also matter? So for example, 10th house, Aquarius, I have Venus. So does that come into play in what kind of, the intention that I'm setting, or is that independent?
Yes. I mean, because you have Venus in your 10th house, Venus is always going to be wanting to be expressed in your career. Right. And so, if you came to, for instance, I offer astrological branding consultations. And when we look at something like understanding your brand, I would look at any planets in your 10th house and I would know, wow, you really need to find a way to be embodying the Venusian energy, particularly Venus and Aquarius, in your 10th house somewhere. I would see it as like a primary branding archetype that you might work with, But yes, anytime that a planet is coming through that house, and particularly at the time that it activates that. So I don't know if, for instance, if the new moon is going to be happening right on your Venus, that would be more impactful. If it was happening in the same sign, but maybe like 15 degrees away, it would be a little different, But every time that the moon moves through Aquarius, it's passing over your Venus, and you always have Venus in your 10th house. She's not going anywhere. And so, the energy of Venus having to do with relationship and connection. That can be business relationship. It doesn't have to be like personal, but it's, relationship, how it deals with finances and money, how it deals with beauty and pleasure. I could see that being a time where you're like, oh, maybe I want to redesign my branding, or, because Venus often is like, how do I make things more beautiful? How do I make things more harmonious? It could be a time that you reconsider how you're engaging with your finances around it, because Venus rules money. So yeah, I mean, there's different ways that might show up for you, but I would always consider it as part of the story as well. Absolutely.
And that's beautiful what you said. It's really, really interesting that that's part of the branding almost, right? The planet, the house, the sign. Do you want to tell me what you think my branding could be based on just like that little information you have. And I
Yeah.
know you don't have my
No, I
chart.
know, I
So.
know. Well, yeah, exactly. To me, that's like oversimplifying it. But I see
Right.
brand personality at kind of the core of someone's brand personality being a combination of their rising sign and their midheaven. Okay. And so, I don't know I don't know if your midheaven is an Aquarius or if it's just your 10th house. So I'm not totally sure about that either because I don't know your chart.
Okay.
Your
Right.
midheaven is not always in your 10th house. It can be in your ninth, it can be in your 11th. But yeah, I often look at those two archetypes together as kind of the
Mhm.
foundational, like, personality of your brand. Why? Because your rising sign is sort of how you show up in the world. If you show up at a party and you don't know
Mhm.
anybody, right? You're really embodying the energy of your rising sign more often than not. Not that other parts of your, chart aren't coming to play, but whether you're somebody that's going to come in and be super social in a room where you don't know anybody, or you're sort of going to lay back and kind of watch and what's going on, usually we're embodying in unfamiliar settings, the energy of our rising sign. And then our midheaven or
Mhm.
our 10th house often has to do with how we're perceived by the public, our reputation. And it could be often our
Mm.
reputation that precedes us. And sometimes people don't resonate with that personally as much, but it is how other people see them. So now you want to kind of bridge
Mm.
together how you're already being seen by the world and how you actually show up. And when you combine those two together, you get a lot of
Mm.
clarity about a personal brand. Now, thinking about the planet Venus being there, I would say that somehow beauty, harmony, relationship are all things that are actually critically important to your career and to the work that you do. You want to build relationships that are really
Mhm.
important, and probably ones that are, because you talked about Aquarius being there, they may be, more unorthodox. They might be a little bit rebellious. Venus in Aquarius is not a traditional Venus. She wants to do it in a very unique and different and sometimes very independent kind of way. But fundamentally, Venus is still Venus. She cares about creating relationship and harmony, even if it is kind of a more forward
Mhm.
thinking, progressive kind of expression of that or whatever. But I would say, yeah, you want to find a place in your career that you're getting to honor her and you're actually getting to embody that energy in some way. Yeah, I wish I could tell you more, but without looking at your chart, like, I don't want to, I don't like simplifying things too much, because that's
Mhm.
part of the challenge with
Yeah.
astrology is, like, unfortunately, it gets really watered down. And so,
Yeah.
and sometimes we have to do that for the sake of just sharing information with a following and an audience that doesn't know any astrology. It's like you need to kind of make it bite sized. But at the same time, you don't want to,
Mhm.
like, overly simplify, because sometimes people latch onto that and they lose a lot of the magic and the nuance of astrology. Like, if you're just like,
Right.
you know, I'm just an Aries, and so I always just jump into things without thinking, it's like, yeah, okay. But, like, I feel like sometimes when we just break things down to such small pieces and lose the interconnectedness of
Mhm.
it, something really critical and essential to astrology goes missing. And so I don't like doing that too much.
Mhm. I agree. Yeah, absolutely. Is there so like Taurus rising
Mhm.
sign and Venus 10th house? So is there a disconnect between who I am and how I show up
No,
and how
actually,
people
that's a
perceive
beautiful
me?
combination because your ruling planet is
Okay.
actually Venus. If you're a Taurus rising, Venus is the ruler of Taurus. So you have your ruling
Cool.
planet in your house of career, which is also to say that career is a very central and important part of your life. Your calling, your reputation actually are deeply, deeply important to you because your ruling planet and the position of your ruling planet is really important, you know? So actually, I think
Mhm.
those two work really well together,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I pay a lot of attention to where the planets that rule certain houses or
Mhm.
signs are. And so the fact that it is
Yeah.
your ruling planet, the sign that rules your ascendant, and it's positioned in your 10th house, is actually a very strong position. I would see that as being very supportive of having a career that is very based on relationship, and that is potentially could be very aligned with the feminine in some way, and also is financially successful. I would often think that to be the case also.
Great. Thank you.
Sure.
I'll take that.
Sure.
Okay, so what we're gonna do now is move on to each ascendant
Sure.
or rising sign and what 2025 might look like, what the focus might be for them.
Okay, I've got some notes because I'm pulling up. You had mentioned that I made a post about
Yeah.
this, so I pulled up my post because, of course, I don't have all of this memorized in my head 24/7. But yeah, once again, I don't like simplifying too much, so it's not like, okay, there's just this one theme of the year. What I did is I pulled out some of the really big transits, some of the major sign changes that are happening, particularly with those outer moving planets, to kind of give us a focus. But by no means is this somehow exhaustive of the one main theme of the year or something like that. So I'm going to start with Aries rising. So if you're Aries rising or you have Aries in the first house, it means that, you have Saturn and Neptune entering into your first house, because they'll both be entering into the sign of Aries this year. So I really see this as people beginning to build something real. So if they've been in a phase of like kind of fake it till they make it, now it's like it's time to build the structure that's really going to back it up. The Aries rising people, their public image is getting kind of an upgrade, but also a bit of a reality check. But it's a really good time for strengthening their support systems and kind of building strong foundations in their business. And it's not the kind of thing you want to rush. For Aries rising, it's definitely a good year to really, Aries like to sprint ahead. We like to jump in, but it's definitely a good year to take your time to build a strong foundation so that you can really step into the type of leadership that you've always wanted to embody. Taurus rising, 2025, I think it's a great year for strategic preparation. Because Saturn and Neptune are kind of going to be your strategy team in this case, but coming kind of from a more unconscious place. Like, I think this is a powerful year for you to like open up to, very imaginative solutions, maybe like downloads or things that kind of come through your dream space or something like that. I think the deep work that you do this year will lead to very big, major breakthroughs later. But I think it's also a big year for revolutionizing how it is that you make money. And so if you've had any kind of crazy business ideas that have seemed sort of too out there, this actually could be the year to maybe start to actually move forward on those in some way. Gemini rising. So I'm a Gemini rising. This is definitely a year about getting really crystal clear on building your network. Because and the network that actually matches who and who you are now and where you're going versus maybe where you've been. And that might be changing something about your relationship to community. But it's a big year for building your community, creating professional circles that really match your new vision. I think it's a year where there's possibility for a lot of new revenue streams that might be coming through. And it's also a year where your brand might have a really bold kind of upgrade or reinvention in some way. So if you were thinking about a rebrand, personal rebrand of some sort, this is the year to be willing to kind of be different and do that. Cancer rising, this is a year about really owning your experience. This is like, you kind of can't continue to hide behind the scenes anymore. This is a year where you're sort of stepping into the spotlight more and being willing to, cement your position as the professional authority and the leader that you are in your niche. There is a lot of personal growth and expansion that's happening. And it's also a time where you can experiment with a lot of kind of behind the scenes things. So that you can really step forward and claim your leadership in a much more confident way. But because you've kind of taken time to do a little bit of behind the scenes experimenting beforehand. Leo rising, I think this is a year with a lot of bold expansion, but also a time for some deeper strategic kind of introspection in your business. So for instance, if your business or your brand is looking to expand, maybe internationally to new territories, maybe going online, great year for that. It's definitely also a year for maybe low-key sort of preparation for some of these more powerful launches. And I think it's also a great year for collaboration if you're going to choose to start, collaborating with people that might be really big game changes. But I think this is a year where if you've had some kind of a global vision, if you've been wanting to kind of be on a bigger stage, this is the year you lay the groundwork for that. Virgo rising, it's a big year about learning how to handle your partnerships and your joint financial resources, or maybe your business resources, in a more innovative way. So, think outside the box. Think about new approaches regarding collaborations, regarding financial investments. This is a great year for leveraging your network. Like, your professional connections are going to be key and like gold mine for how it is that you make moves this year. And expect some unexpected opportunities and up-leveling related to career in some way. And they may be more unconventional than you're used to. Okay, what's next? We got Libra rising. Libra rising, this is another year of focusing on collaboration as well. I mean, Libra is very, partnership focused, but definitely a year to, engage in the kind of collaborations that are going to take things further for you. I think it's almost like learning how to find a year that's like a perfect balance between stepping in your personal authority and at the same time being in a supportive type of business partnership. So refining that, where it's like less about the quantity of partnerships, but more about the quality of your business relationships. You're definitely finding that your influence in your niche is expanding this year, that you're getting more public recognition than you have before. And yeah, this is maybe a good year to innovate in some way about what type of platforms you're showing up on and how it is that you're showing your presence, maybe online or maybe in person. But think about high profile and strategic collaborations and start reaching out to those people this year. Scorpio rising, this is a year where it's really about building strong systems. So, if you want to make bold moves, you've got to create a machine that runs really smoothly for you so that you have that as a jumping off point. So focus on operations and creating more efficiency in your operations. There's definitely opportunity for more expanding in your market. And then also it's a good year for potential investment opportunities that might be unexpected in terms of returns, that may, be more innovative than you're used to. Maybe it's like in the cryptocurrency space or something like that. But the more you focus on your systems, that's really going to help take you to the next level. Okay, we got a couple more. I know there's 12. It keeps going. Okay. Sagittarius rising. It's a really great year for diving deeper into your creativity and letting your creativity actually, manifest into more tangible sort of results. So, that sweet spot between your artistic vision and your business strategy. So, focus on creative development. Find, the right types of inspiration that you can turn into a more profitable kind of offering. Look for funding and support for resources and maybe from more unexpected sort of sources. And you might have some kind of unusual partnerships or collaborations this year that could lead to some kind of breakthroughs. But if you've had any kind of like side hustles or side projects that are creatively inspired, give them a little bit of structure, give them more support, and see if they actually end up scaling for you. Capricorn rising, this is about building a strong internal foundation this year, and then maybe being a little bit more innovative in the operations of your business and how things flow. So, try to build something that's both stable, but also adaptable. This is a year, like I said, where there's a lot of change. So we want to have the kind of infrastructure that is solid, but that can support growth. Key partnerships can really be helpful for you this year. And then, taking maybe a more unconventional approach to sort of day-to-day operations in your business. So I would say it's a great year to do like an operations overhaul of like, okay, how have things not been working? How can we make them more, sustainable? Aquarius rising. I mean, this is big for Aquarius rising. Pluto just entered into Aquarius. Pluto's really activating their chart this year. And it will be for quite some time. But I think this is a year to get really clear about the messages that you're putting out there. What is your messaging? It's not generic market time anymore. This is about letting your unique perspective come forward and really be your competitive edge. So look at your brand messaging. You want to be clear, but you want to be, you uniquely. You can really level up your operations and specifically team dynamics this year. And I think this could be a great year for having like sort of a creative renaissance in your offerings. If things feel kind of stale, be willing to allow them to adapt and change. But I think this is a good year of like letting it be okay that you're breaking all the traditional rules of business and letting your unique genius be kind of what drives you. And last but not least, Pisces rising. So I think this is a big year about your worth, getting really clear about what your worth is and also restructuring how it is that you operate. So if you've been undervaluing yourself, your ideas, your time, you might need to end up changing your pricing. You might need to change your business model, but look at your value proposition, price your time, price your offerings appropriately. Use a lot of the new innovative ideas that are coming through for you and put them out there to like attract the right audience for you. And make sure that the systems that you're using are flexible enough that they can scale and grow rapidly. But I think definitely focusing on the premium price point, focusing on, ensuring that you are getting, reciprocity in the value that you're offering this year is really, really big. Okay. Yeah. That's the gist of it.
Thank you for that.
Sure. You're very welcome.
And I wanted to ask you one more thing. And only because it's come up a few times. Pluto is going into Aquarius. Yep. What is that? What does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, we talk a lot about these outer planet movements because, like I said, Pluto moves so slowly. It takes 250 years to go around the chart. I was born when Pluto was in Scorpio. he's since gone to Sag and Capricorn, and now he's entering into Aquarius. So in the course of my lifetime, I'm 38 years old. This is only the fourth sign that Pluto has been in since I've been born, you know? So, you know, they're no small things when these outer planets change. And the outer planets do affect us on personal levels, but really when we're wanting to understand the movements of the outer planets, we're looking at how things are changing in the collective, things are changing in society. These are like the generational changes we see between, you know, the boomer generation versus Gen X versus millennial versus Gen Z. You know, we see major differences in how culture and community look, you know, and culture and society look because of how, you know, where the positioning of these outer planets are. So yes, in 2023, Pluto entered into Aquarius for just a couple short months. And when that happened, that was the beginning of ChatGPT launching. And it was really the push of AI. And then he moved back out into Capricorn for a bit because he did his little retrograde dance. And then from January of 2024 all the way to fall of last year, he was also in Aquarius. And we were seeing that was really taking front and center stage, you know, and I don't want to just chalk it up to like Pluto and Aquarius is only about AI, but it's one avenue of society and of business. You know, we've seen all of a sudden businesses' reliance on AI or building systems around AI has been very, very driven by Pluto's entrance into Aquarius, because Aquarius is the sign that deals with the future and technology and architecting these new realities and disrupting the matrix of how things have been done, you know? And Pluto really wants to revolutionize these areas, you know? It's also going to show us where the shadow is of these things, because it's not just, oh, it's great. You know, we're also looking at why are we scared of AI, or how is it taking people's jobs, or like whatever the stories are about, like what is the shadow of cryptocurrency, for instance, or, you know. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot that we're seeing around that. But now Pluto is officially moved into Aquarius for good. And so he's going to spend the next 20 years in this sign. And in that time, we're going to learn both the dark and the sketchy and the shady side of the Aquarius dream, of the Aquarius technological sort of futuristic vision. And we're also going to get some really beautiful transformation as a result of it as well. It's going to be both and, you know, to me, there is no planetary placement or movement that is exclusively positive or exclusively negative. It will embody the full spectrum of kind of the highest embodiment of it and also the lowest of low. And, you know, we get to learn how to work with that. It's revealing a lot to us. So yeah, I mean, but that's, you know, it definitely, AI isn't going anywhere. And we're going to be seeing a lot more of, hey, the systems and structures in society that we had depended upon, that we thought were stable, that have crumbled on us, you know, over the last decade or so. We've really been watching that happen. Now we're learning how to, what is the new way, and whether that new way is going to be better or, you know, just new will yet to be seen. But we're definitely needing to create new ways of structuring institutions, of how power dynamics are working in the world, of how governments are being structured, and, you know, of, you know, everything, because, you know, Pluto really shows us like where things need to die and be recomposted in the big picture of things, you know?
Yeah.
It's a big one. And you've probably heard a lot about it online. I mean, it's definitely something astrologers have been talking about for quite some time. And yeah, we got 20 years to figure it out. So
okay, so tell us where people can find you, and it's going to be written somewhere up here. Where can people find you?
Yeah, well, yeah, I know you and I connected on Instagram. I live a lot on Instagram. My handle on Instagram is astrobizOracle. But I also have a website. It's Sabrina Ourania. So it's OURANIA.com. And you can find me on there. You can find all the different readings I offer. I do individual readings. I also have, you know, some cool digital products for you to learn more about astrology and how to work with it in your business. And I also do ongoing business and leadership astrological, you know, coaching and consulting, which I really love doing. I love working with, you know, visionary people that are like creating incredible, you know, just diving into new fields, totally revolutionizing them. And, you know, I love working with high impact leaders and showing them how they can blend, you know, leadership strategy with astrology to, you know, guide their decisions, to find more clarity, to find more validation in their purpose. I think we talked a little bit about how I do brand work. I also can help people like schedule their launches by understanding maybe the best time to launch certain projects, you know, or products or offerings using astrology. I also, another piece of the work I do is I love astrocartography. because I work in, I live international. I'm a bit of a digital nomad. And so I love working with people who are interested in expanding their business or even just traveling internationally, and how astrology and locational astrology can actually support them as well, which is like a whole other avenue. But yeah, there's so many applications, and it's something that I just really love doing. I'm deeply, deeply passionate
Great.
about it, if you couldn't tell about how I talk about it. So yeah, very just grateful to be here and be able to share about this topic.
Yeah, no, I can tell. Yeah, I can tell that this is part of your soul purpose and you're living it
Hmm.
from how passionate you are and how you were able to explain certain things, like understand it, explain it, how some people might perceive it all superficial level and also like the deeper parts of it. Totally get it. And thank you. Thank you for giving me your time. I learned a lot. I enjoyed talking to you. And yeah, thank you so
My
much.
pleasure. Thanks for having me.